All right, we got another 49ers reaction live with my man Bobby Burton because he covered this guy in college. That is Alfred Collins, the defensive tackle whom the 49ers drafted in the second round. And nobody does a better job covering Texas football, especially on YouTube, than Bobby and all of his guys over at On3 Texas Football. So we got some expert insight today. Bobby, how's it going?
Good. How you doing, David? Glad y'all are liking Alfred Collins so far.
Well, I had a chance to see him not play or not practice because there's still a little minor calf injury that he's working through. But I just had a chance to see him in person and meet him, too. He's Trent Brown's cousin, actually. Trent Brown, the 49ers former offensive tackle. And everybody knew Trent Brown as a very large man. And Alfred Collins, another really big guy. I think the measurements at Texas were 6'5" and change, 332 pounds. And it looks like he carries the weight really well. And it looks like he's very motivated to work hard. Like his entire first interview, he kept on circling back to, we got to put in the work. Like nothing is given. And I thought that was a tremendous amount of maturity for a rookie. Normally they'll come in and the first interview is a little short and they don't really, they may talk about their family, but he constantly circled back. Even when the question wasn't about work ethic, he circled back to the importance of work. And to me, I'm just wondering if you had a similar experience with him because you did get to cover him for several years at Texas. It does seem that he does put in the work and is a very diligent guy.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think Texas does a really nice job with their players, feeding them kind of what to say at certain times. So whether it's Alfred Collins or whoever out there, Jahdae Barron gets mentioned a lot with the press in Denver, and all these guys do a really nice job overall, I think, with the press. And it's part of it's just like being at a Notre Dame. Those guys get a lot. They're in a fishbowl early on in life. And so they learn how to speak to the media. But you talk about how big Alfred Collins is. I've covered him for 6 years, going back to his junior and senior year of high school when he was a 5-star recruit coming out of Bastrop High School. Cedar Creek High School in Bastrop, Texas. Bastrop is like a 30-minute drive to Austin, just for people. So he's a local, homegrown guy. His mom was one of the great players in basketball at the University of Texas as well. And so what I would say to folks is he is an interesting player because he really came on the last half of his career at Texas. And it was never because of athleticism or ability. He flashed early in his time at Texas, but he didn't become a true rotational player, an every other series player until his junior year. And that is when, David, he finally had some injuries early in his career. Shoulder injury kept him from working out for a month during the summertime when that's all they're really doing. These young guys is working out and gaining weight and strength. But over the last year, I would say really the year and a half, midway through 2023, all the way through 2024, he has been one of Texas's most consistent performers, which he wasn't early in his career because I just don't think he was ready physically because he is so big. And you mentioned this looking at that picture when we were talking this pregame a little bit, how big he is and how filled out he looks compared to some other guys that come in. He wasn't always that way. And the reason I'll tell you that, David, is because he was a basketball player. He played 2 sports, was a recruitable athlete at some level in basketball. Now, not D1, you know what I mean? But he would have been had he chosen to go that direction. But I'm a big believer in his talent level. I thought the guy that I saw another guy, the same height and weight, similar, coming out of high school, and I always compared him to him, was Chris Jones out of Mississippi, the Kansas City Chiefs guy.
Yeah.
Because they have those long arms that go on forever, yet they're still naturally big, and he is a upfield pass rusher. Now, will he have the career of a Chris Jones? I mean, there's only one Chris Jones, right? So it's hard to make that comparison, but that's the body type and the type of possibility if he actually goes out and works as hard as he says he's going to, et cetera.
Well, that's interesting to me. And when I first got a chance to meet Alfred at the 49ers rookie minicamp, I asked him who he models his game after. He didn't say Chris Jones, but he mentioned another very tall defensive lineman who is still playing, who's been in the league for a while. Have a listen to this. This might bring you back to the old days when you got to cover and make videos like this of Alfred Collins. Defensive tackles have you watched most, or maybe even modeled some of your game after?
I really like Calais Campbell. He's just some of my size, tall, can do it all. So I want my game to be versatile, So I look at him as a.
So Calais Campbell, who's 6'8", by the way. I think Alfred's somewhere between 6'5" and 6'6", but later on, I asked him a few more questions about that, and he really emphasized that. But to get to that level, I've got to work, and he admires Calais Campbell's work ethic. But I mean, that's. I mean, if you could be 50% of that type of player at the NFL level, I think you're going to do well for yourself. And, one thing that I really noticed, Bobby, when watching the tape and then just seeing the stat sheet too, because I thought that he had 7 pass breakups, like 7 bat downs at the line of scrimmage just last year for Texas. And I'm like, that's a lot. Like it's a stat that I don't normally like look at or track all too much. You just know who's tall and who isn't. But 7, that goes beyond the point of, oh, I'm tall and, maybe I'm lucky a couple times. 7 means that your head's in the game. You're understanding depth. You're understanding which way the football may go. You know when to raise your hand. You know when to look up. You're not just sucked into the blocker. And, the cornerback you're talking about, Jahdae Barron, he had 8 last year. Yeah. So Alfred Collins, it's my favorite stat. He had almost as many pass breakups as the Jim Thorpe Award winners, a first-round draft pick of the Denver Broncos at cornerback.
Yes, and I think I would tell you that he plays well with his eyes, if that makes sense. So he is not just a blind upfield rusher. He plays well with his eyes. I thought there was a chance. So he's out still with a calf injury, right? With the Niners. I thought there was a chance he might work his way into the first round of the NFL draft.
Wow.
If it were just, but he didn't work out at pro day at Texas even, because he's still kind of nursing that calf. You know what I mean? He has that type of ability. He really does. He was a 5-star coming out of high school for a reason. You can see it in some of his highlight tapes. Think about that about Alfred is he has an ability to he is a good athlete, not just a big athlete, if that makes sense. I think he averaged something like 20-something points a game in basketball. Just to give you he's a legitimate dude, right? And so I think that when there's a game to be played, that can happen. Also, I would say that he got a lot of those on in the RPO game. I mean, quick passes and gets his hands up really quick. You're going to like him as a 49er fan, I think, as long as he stays healthy and can get into that lineup, because I do think he'll be productive. A lot of times at Texas, they had to double on the inside him. But as the season went on, Alfred got even better because Texas has a young pass rusher named Colin Simmons, David, who will be a top 5 pick in a couple of years. He was a National Freshman of the Year. And when they put Colin Simmons in and Alfred kind of side by side as edge and defensive tackle, it opened things up even more for Alfred. And I think you got to see a little bit more of what he could even do as opposed to when they were, double teaming him on the interior.
What is it like, Bobby, covering a team that obviously Texas is in the middle of a huge renaissance, one of the most talented rosters in college football? I mean, I covered the 49ers, and they, for years here, I would say, had the most talented roster in the NFL and a ton of A-list players. But I think at college, it's a whole other level. The amount of 5-star recruits pumping into Texas these days. I mean, it must be a gold mine for you, right? When you're covering a team that has this much talent, when you're talking about a guy like Alfred Collins not really having the full chance to blossom until his last couple of years at the school.
Yeah, well, it's with Alfred in particular. I mean, Byron Murphy was a first rounder of the Seahawks last year. He's a defensive tackle. And then Tavondre Sweat won the Outland. He was a 2nd-round pick of the Titans. So those were the 2 starting defensive tackles at Texas Alfred's junior year. So, I mean, those are legitimate guys, right? So you're not I mean, that's what's going to happen. But Texas is undergoing a renaissance, and there are aspects of college football that are not fair. That's why when people call Nick Saban the greatest coach of all time, I don't know if he's the greatest coach or the greatest talent accumulator of all time. I mean, he had his Alabama teams. It wasn't all X's and O's. It was Jimmy and Joe, And I think that you're allowed to do that in the college game, unlike you are. I mean, you just can't. Even though you can have great teams like the Niners, certainly, or have been one of the tremendous NFL franchises. You can't do the same. You can't collect that same level of talent over and over again, and keep the water faucet going. You're going to eventually be picking in the 20s and 30s if you're good in the NFL. And the NFL, in the college football, you can go to the front of the line, especially now with NIL. So.
Yeah, so it has indeed turned into a gold mine. Texas has won a lot of games here in recent years. That this last season obviously was a special run. How was Collins in some of the biggest games in particular? Because you get to watch him against other top 2 round, top 3 round talent in some of those games. You had the chance? There's a large enough sample with Texas heading to the playoff this past season to truly look at some of these guys and maybe start to gauge if they are big game players. Do you think that he fit into that mold?
Oh yeah, I mean, against Clemson, he had a great game in the playoffs. Had a great game against Arizona State early. And then Texas was on the field for 100 defensive plays against Arizona State. So that kind of took back.
Yeah.
But he had great first 3 quarters, and then thought he had a great game against Ohio State. And funny enough, the first game that people really will remember of Alfred Collins in his Texas career was a Alamo Bowl win against Colorado, where he made a one-handed tipped interception. He batted the ball and tipped it to himself for an interception as a true freshman. So, I mean, that's what the first play Texas fans really remember about Alfred Collins. He's grown into something much more than just this one trick wonder. But I like where he's at. I like what they've done. I do think that as long as he's healthy, and that is going to be the big thing for just about anybody drafted as highly as they draft him, I think he's got a chance to be a long-term NFL player, like 8, 10, 12-year guy. I mean, he's that kind of body, that kind of athlete. So you're looking at a guy that you think is going to get to a second contract at the very least.
Well, the guy that he's trying to model his game after, Calais Campbell, has been in for a decade and a half. He's still doing it for Arizona. He's back with his original team now. And that's, the reason I think that's significant is because you've got to have the attention to detail and work ethic to last that long in the league. But just as important is you have to have the physical characteristics. And tall defensive tackle is an interesting position, right? Because you're obviously you have the benefits of the length, especially if you can leverage those benefits. And we see it with the pass breakups. And then he's got extremely long arms. That's the next thing I really want to delve into. His wingspan's over 7 feet. So you can keep some blockers at bay, but you tend to be a little bit more leggy if you're tall, and that could hurt your point of leverage, right? Your center of gravity could be a little bit too high. So some of these tall defensive tackles are constantly playing this battle where they want to accentuate the strength, but minimize the potential weakness of the high center of gravity so that blockers can't get too far underneath them. You got to cover him since that 2020 season. You talked about the tip interception that he delivered. That was the only interception of his career, despite all those pass breakups, those bat downs at the line of scrimmage. Is this a player who technique wise got better, was able to kind of handle the height over his time? Is that something that led to him finally having that true playing time breakthrough by the end?
Yes, it was a slow burn though. Texas, his defensive line coach beginning his second season at Texas was Bo Davis.
Okay.
So Bo Davis came to Texas from the Detroit Lions and then is now the defensive line coach at the New Orleans Saints. Really good defensive line coach. And very technique sound, right? And all of those guys, whether it was Byron Murphy, Vernon Broughton went in this draft as well, Tavondre Sweat, their second and third years at Texas, David, they all kind of blossomed under Bo Davis. There wasn't one of them that just came out of the gates and were like, oh my God, this guy's going to be unbelievable year one. But as they got into that system that Bo Davis created, I think he is there and is well coached from a technique perspective. I would say this when you talk about him getting rooted out because he's a smaller defensive, or he's a higher waisted defensive tackle, if that's the way you want to put it, that will happen at times. But he takes care of double teams really, really well, and he does it with his quickness and athleticism. I would also tell you that the thing about Alfred Collins, he lined up at end his freshman and sophomore year at Texas. He wasn't just a defensive tackle. And so now as he went up to 330 pounds, you're going to have a 330-pound defensive end, right?
Not in this game. Yeah. Not in the modern era.
But my point to you and to those people out there, I think that is very legitimate, is he's just he's a very, very talented individual. If the 49ers get the max out of him, they're going to get a difference maker at some level. May not be this year, may not be next year. Maybe year 3 and 4 as he gets used to the NFL, but he's that kind of player. I mean, I think he's a top 25 talent overall. That's why he was a 5-star in recruiting. Whether it's, people that were ahead of him that were just as good and a little bit older, like Sweat, or kind of taking a little bit of his shine off of him, if that makes sense, in prioritization. But I think he was one of the more intriguing prospects in the draft as a whole, and certainly one that probably has as much, if not more, upside than anybody in the draft from Texas, other than maybe Kelvin Banks, in my opinion.
So I have to talk about the wingspan, over 7 feet. The 49ers have drafted 2 of these guys with their top 2 picks. That not Michael Williams, the pick out of Georgia, who maybe was second choice to Kelvin Banks, one of the players you covered at Texas. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Michael Williams, the edge rusher who can also rush from the inside from Georgia, he's just under 7 feet in total wingspan, 34+ inch arms, which is that's a measurement that you normally associate with offensive tackles. So you really like that at edge. Then you add Alfred Collins.
David, I got to say that we saw him, by the way.
You did? Okay.
In the SEC championship game.
Yes, that's true. That was a great game. That was the overtime game, right?
They had 2 freaks at outside linebacker in that game. Georgia had 2 guys. I think they both went top 10-ish. Yeah, Michael Williams is he's, to your point, these guys have wingspans now that just unreal, But he was a player.
So if we always talk about tackles in the NFL needing the 34-inch arms to fend off these edge rushers, and it's because a lot of times the edge rushers got 34-inch arms, and then you say, okay, well, the guards, they don't need as long of arms because the guys they're dealing with on the inside typically aren't as long as the edge rushers. But in the case of Alfred Collins, his arms are longer than Michael Williams' arms, and it's a full 7 feet plus on the wingspan. So I can just picture, I know he's still developing as a pass rusher. Everybody is when they're coming to the NFL level. Very few prospects are going to be as polished as Nick Bosa, who's a complete ninja with his hands and was ready to go day one. These guys are going to be developing the intricacies and the nuance. But I could just imagine, and I've seen it on tape already, that a 7-foot wingspan working against the more compact frame of guards, there's a lot of meat on the bone here, pass rushing wise. And some of the highlights that you see from Alfred Collins, you're like, wow, that guy flashed. And a lot of it's because he can keep blockers far away from him with those arms.
That does help. That absolutely helps. At his position too, you want to push the pocket a little bit and just get in the quarterback's line of sight at some level. And his size, height, and arm length allows him to do that. You mentioned the batted balls. That's part of that, in my opinion, as well. But he's a very talented player overall, and I thought he was from the middle of his junior year, which was 2023, to the end of 2024, he was as productive and consistent as any performer at Texas during that time frame.
Which is saying something.
Yeah, it really is, because they had back-to-back national semifinal appearances. They won 12 games in 2023. They won 13 games in 2024. And he was a stalwart in that defensive front. There's no two ways about it.
Wow. High praise for Alfred Collins. Now, you mentioned some of the coaching. You mentioned Bo Davis. You mentioned the Lions, too. This is something I didn't realize. He actually succeeded Chris Kasarik as the defensive coach of the Lions. And Kasarik is now Alfred Collins' defensive line coach with the 49ers. So I'm sure there's some player overlap there.
Well, this is scary. I scouted Chris Kasarik when he was a high school player in Caldwell, Texas.
He is from Texas.
He's from Caldwell, Texas, and he signed with Arkansas. I think he either signed with Arkansas or Texas Tech. But the Arkansas defensive line coach was an old friend of mine named Jim Washburn.
Jim Washburn is his mentor.
Yeah,
that's the architect of the wide nine. So you're friends with Jim Washburn?
Oh, I haven't talked to him in probably 15, 20 years since he went to the NFL, because I didn't have any need to anymore. He wasn't talking recruiting. But yes, back in the day, I used to talk to him on the phone all the time about. And Chris Kasarik was one of the guys I talked to him about when he was a player. This was got to be 25, mid-90s, probably 97, 98. Something
that
like
makes sense. And then, Jim Washburn is like the father of the wide nine, and that's what the 49ers run. And now Alfred Collins is going to be in that system for the 49ers. And basically what that system is, for fans who need a little bit more explanation on it, is the linemen are lined up further apart, and it's to give the defensive ends more advantageous speed rushing angles on the tackles, so you could run the hoop around the tackle. The potential downsides of it are there's more space in between the defensive linemen, so each guy has to occupy more room, and that's why you need what I call Ferraris at defensive tackle, or else the system's not going to look very good. You need big, long, or at least one big, long defensive tackle. Usually you're going to want the longer one, and then you're going to want the stouter one with a lower center of gravity. And the 49ers drafted CJ West, who's the stouter one out of Indiana. And Alfred Collins, I think, is who they want to be DeForest Buckner. They want the taller 7-foot wingspan. But now he's going to get to play in the Washburn system and the Chris Kasarik system. And for you, this is the proof that football is a very, very small world.
It really is. I didn't know that Chris Kasarik was there. The interesting thing about that whole stuff is, like, I remember Jim Washburn left Arkansas, I believe, to go to the Tennessee Titans. And you're talking about that. Why he had Javon Curse, for people that remember. He
was there for 11 years.
Yeah. So that was one that is. That guys like that in both, they will make you better coaches, and they'll force you into playing them in a way that lets them kind of dominate how they do it. And those, I don't know if Alfred Collins will ever be that caliber of player, right? But it's interesting that he is more of a 3/5 technique than he is a 0 technique or a 1.
Yeah,
next to the center.
And they very specifically drafted a 1 in CJ West. I know that Indiana also made it to the college football playoff. I know Texas didn't play him, but this guy, CJ West, it's fascinating, because I'd always thought of Indiana as a basketball school. I know things are changing now with NIL. 49ers drafted 2 Indiana Hoosiers from their football team, not from the basketball program. So we know in the year 2025. Anyway, one of them is CJ West, who transferred from Kent State to Indiana. And this is one of your 6 foot, if we're being generous, he might even be, I think he's 6 foot, but he's wider, right? Much wider than a guy like Alfred Collins. So he's your fire hydrant in the middle. Completely transformed Indiana's run defense over the course of his 1 year there. And that was probably the hidden reason why they made it to the playoff. They got the quarterback too, the 49ers did, and Curtis Rourke, who helped a lot. But the one technique has been accounted for. The 49ers needed both They needed a taller defensive tackle, and they got that in Collins. And they're going to try to mix and match him with CJ West. And it was really funny because the 49ers fly all the rookies in at the same time into San Francisco. So they're coming from different spots, but they try to coordinate the flights. And the two guys who like recognized each other were Alfred Collins and CJ West, because they're the most physically recognizable. Alfred, massive, tall. CJ West is your fire hydrant there in the middle. And both said, yeah, you're very, very identifiable. And they're going to be at the middle of that defensive line now.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, look, I think that the great thing about the NFL compared to what I cover is college football, right? The great thing is it really allows for great athletes to be put in the perfect position for them. So Alfred Collins had to play some over the nose at Texas. Okay, right? But he had to, out of just, he's as good as you had at times, right?
Yes.
And so you had to play him there at times. In the NFL, it will be rare that he ever sees that. I mean, it'd be extraordinarily rare. And that is a difference about the NFL than college football. Xavier Worthy would play. Xavier Worthy is a good example for us. It's the former wide receiver now for the Kansas City Chiefs. He had to play everywhere for Texas. Well, Kansas City Chiefs don't need him to play everywhere. They need him to do one thing, and that's take the top off the defense, right? And that is a difference in college football to pro football that I think is one of the more underlooked pieces of the puzzle. You get a lot more specialization. I have a question for you. You're a Stanford guy at some level. Got to ask this for you.
At some level.
Emmitt Mosley the fifth. How good is he? Texas just got him in the transfer portal, and I wanted to ask you that question, Dave.
Well, if I were following Stanford football a lot more closely, I would have a much better answer for you. Is wide out, right?
Yep, wide
out from Stanford. They're undergoing major upheaval, major change there. Andrew Luck is the new GM. Frank Reich is the interim coach over at Stanford. So Mosley was, I believe, a Troy Taylor guy, the former coach. If Texas wanted him, then I think he's going to be a fine player. I'm not going to pretend that I'm the Stanford football expert anymore, though.
Okay.
This was 5 years ago. No, 10 years ago. I've covered the Niners now for 8 or 9 years. And I was the guy 10 years ago for Stanford football. I might have been the only guy for Stanford football. And I'm sorry if I don't know, then there probably aren't going to be many reporters who do, because there just aren't many people who go watch their games. I'm really hoping that Stanford is able to give us some positive entertainment. And I think that Andrew Luck in place now is hopefully going to give that a rudder in a positive direction. Texas guy, right? Andrew Luck from the Houston area. Yeah. So
Texas actually reached into Northern California, not only for Emmitt Mosley, the wide receiver at Stanford, but also Jack Indries, the tight end at Cal. Both the transport portal guys for the Longhorns this year.
So look at Texas. It's the rich robbing from the poor here. Texas.
I don't think Northern California is poor.
College football poor at the moment. Yeah. Everything's bigger in Texas, though. No, but Mosley, if I remember correctly, because I followed it peripherally, I think he's from Orange County.
Yep.
I think he went to Carson Palmer's high school. I think he went to
Santa Margarita Catholic.
Yep, that's Carson Palmer. That he set all the records there. I read recently, by the way, that Carson Palmer was so good as a freshman on the freshman team in high school that, like, while they were practicing, the varsity team would occasionally stop just to watch this guy as a freshman at Santa Margarita Catholic. So that's where Emmitt Mosley went. He's a tall receiver, right? Probably 6'3", 6'2", maybe.
Yeah, he's a bigger guy. He was also a true freshman last year for Stanford. And so he had, I think, 46 or 48 catches. So he's very productive over the last 9 games of the season only. And the question I have, and I think what a lot of Longhorn fans, for example, is a guy has that many catches as a true freshman, he's probably a pretty good player. the question you have is, does Stanford not have anybody else other than the Anamior guy that went in the draft to go alongside him? So was it just, the most natural fit? And he
he was in the right place at the right time.
Or is he really that good? But Texas has a good history right now with transfer wide receivers. Steve Sarkisian's done a good job, not only with Adonai Mitchell a couple of years ago, but now Matthew Golden, the first rounder, came in from the University of Houston last year. So Sark goes after a guy in the portal at receiver. He's probably pretty good.
Well, I'll tell you, I know a little bit more about Alec Moore. He was the real deal, and I think the 49ers really wanted him. John Lynch has the Stanford connection. He went there, and Moore came to the 49ers local pro day, and he was talking there with John Lynch, and they were out at his pro day at Stanford, and they're running him through some drills. That's a really talented guy. I think that all you have to do is to know his ceiling is turn on the tape from that famous comeback against Colorado where he had almost 300 receiving yards, working primarily against Travis Hunter. So that's a big body. Good metrics, and somebody probably still a lot of meat on the bone just for the reason that you mentioned earlier. He's going to be able to be in a much more specialized position in the NFL than he was with a struggling Stanford program. So you talk about Emmitt Mosley on that Stanford team. He definitely wasn't the top option this past year, and he still was able to rack up whatever you said it was, 48 catches. I know that Io Manor was the real deal, and Stanford's going to have a tough time replacing a receiver of that caliber. Speaking of receivers, I could throw this right back at you. You'll probably be a little bit more well-versed on this player. This is a receiver who played at Texas, also a guy who we're talking about in terms of a transfer. He transferred twice in college, went Wyoming, Texas, then to Nebraska. And then he showed up to 49ers rookie minicamp. And it's funny because there were two guys who I decided to really write about after rookie minicamp because they don't have pads on. They're not doing 11 on 11. Anybody who's trying to sell you on, oh, this guy looked great, this guy looked great, probably is selling snake oil. You can't tell a whole lot, but what you can see is the size. What you can see is, okay, this guy's long. So we looked at Collins and, okay, I'm writing about him because he's got size that stands out, 7-foot wingspan. The other guy who I wrote about went through Texas for 2 years. His name is Isaiah Nair, a receiver who's 6'4", 220. And Dane Brugler said he was maybe the most gifted athlete in the entire 2025 rookie class. I know he didn't play a lot at Texas. I know a lot of it was injury related, but you did get to cover him. What are your thoughts on Isaiah Nair?
So athletic freak. I go back a little bit deeper than just Texas with him because I cover recruiting also in the state of Texas. And he was a prospect at Arlington Lamar High School. Okay. That is it used to be one of the powers in the DFW Metroplex in high school football. But he was not a blue chip recruit because he ran track up until his junior year of high school.
Yeah.
So all he did was track. And then all of a sudden he shows up on the football field. And there was actually a receiver that signed with Oklahoma from that same high school that everybody was talking about. And then you go up there and you watch one game and you're like, okay, this Isaiah Nair guy may be a little bit better than you think. He ends up signing with Wyoming, one of the very few offers that he had out of high school. He's grown a couple inches since high school as well. So he's a little bit of a late developer, but he always had this elite speed. When he signed with Texas, I think that year before at Wyoming, he was their touchdown maker. I mean, he scored like 12 touchdowns.
On like 40 catches, like
yes.
A third of his catches were touchdowns.
So Texas signed him over Tennessee. I mean, he was a really highly contested, highly sought guy in the transfer portal. The problem is that he got recruited at the same time as Texas had a guy by the name of Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, who was a second-round pick of the Colts that had come over from Georgia. And then Texas also had a returning starter named Jordan Whittington, who made the Rams as a 7th-round pick last year.
Mm-hmm.
So Texas had 3 NFL receivers in 2023. And Isaiah Nair got nicked up and got sidelined for a week or two in fall camp. that year at Texas in 2023. And because of that, they sidelined him. I mean, he got one catch or two catches the rest of the year, and they didn't come back to him. And he ended up going to Nebraska the very next year. He looked good early at Nebraska, and then I don't know what happened after that. But athletically, you're right. You're not going to draw him up any prettier. The question is whether or not he has the stick-to-itiveness to battle through things that are naturally going to come about in the NFL. Like that was the problem at Texas.
And that's probably why he wasn't drafted, right?
Yeah. If quote unquote there was a problem at Texas, I'm not trying to say that there was, but he didn't see it all the way through to become the team's number 4 wide receiver. Like he kind of he went. I don't want to say he went in the tank, but that's kind of the understanding that I had.
Was there an injury complication? I know he tore the ACL his first camp with Texas, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Was there some trouble maybe getting back from that in 2023?
No, he looked good.
Okay, so there was a full recovery. Got it.
Yeah, there's a full recovery, and then he got nicked up and he got behind Adonai Mitchell. And I mean, look, Adonai Mitchell went in the second round, had a pretty good year with the Colts last year. So, but Texas, right? I mean, it's not unlike Alfred Collins was behind a couple of guys, right? At Texas, that's going to happen when you're playing at Texas a little bit.
So, and it's really interesting because you see the year by year production from Isaiah Nair. And as we talked about the 2021 season at Wyoming, I mean, the box score looks like a mistake, the 12 touchdowns with 44 catches and 20 yards of reception. I mean, he's dominating at Iowa. And then, I mean, solid year. As you said, he trailed off in Nebraska in 2024, but still caught 5 touchdowns, 455 yards, 34 catches. In between, we know there was the ACL tear, but there's only one catch in between 21 and 2024. And as you explained, he just wasn't able to work his way up the depth chart to be in a spot. Even that 4th receiver spot, well, that's a spot that Kyle Shanahan once was able to win at Texas. Wasn't able to get there, and we know Kyle Shanahan's not as gifted as this guy athletically. So, I think that answers why he wasn't drafted right at 6'4", 220.
That's part of it, and Adonai Mitchell never was injured at Texas. That 2023 year, when he was after Nayor was coming back from the ACL. And so he wasn't going to win that job. And I want to say this partially because his route running, Adonai Mitchell, really a great route runner. Isaiah Nayor is still learning to run routes. I'm just
coming from the track background.
Yeah. Track background, went to Wyoming where he ran a bunch of bubble screens. So I think that, that's part of what Isaiah Nayor got dinged on. I don't think until he really because his 23 season at Texas, literally he should have been the 4th receiver and he didn't even play much at all. He literally went in the tank.
Well, it's one of those things where the 49ers didn't have to spend a lot. It's an undrafted free agent signing, and they'll see if they can find a way to coax the upside out of Isaiah Nair as a late bloomer. But I think we've
the talent is there. The talent's there, David.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
There's no doubt.
And it sounds like there's still meat on the bone in terms of route running. So the talent can still, I guess that's more skill, but the talent is there to deliver the route running and the separation that you need to at the NFL level and the blocking on top of that. I have to, while we have you, this is the last thing because this was a show that we've been wanting to do for a while, but we were waiting for the opportunity to do it. Bobby covers Texas football better than anybody. It's On 3 Texas football. If you guys are liking the content on and then the number 3 Texas football, type it in on YouTube. He is basically the version of me for Texas, though, right? He does a bunch of cool videos out in Texas, and he's covered them for a while. And you should probably subscribe to it because I don't think that Alfred Collins and Isaiah Nair are going to be the last players the 49ers deal with who have ties to the Longhorns. And the 49ers coach, Kyle Shanahan, played for Texas. When we first met in the Dallas airport, it was funny.
Yes.
Where I was watching the Pac-12 championship game, the last ever Pac-12 championship game, and that airport closed early, and our flight was delayed like 4 hours. And you came up to me and you're like, "Hey, can I watch the game with you?" It was awesome. And we met and we realized we did the same thing except for different teams. We started talking about Kyle Shanahan and the ties to Texas. Were you covering Texas yet at the time, or where were you in your career when Kyle was playing for the Longhorns?
So to give you an idea, I'm 55. So Kyle Shanahan is what, 46, 47, something like that, probably.
Okay.
He played at Texas with Chris Sims.
Yes.
And one of my coworkers. So we at Odd Texas Football, we have 5 or 6 guys that do various podcasts and whatnot. And one of my coworkers there is a guy named Rod Babers that played in the NFL, was a defensive back. And he is very good friends with Kyle Shanahan, actually, because they played together at Texas. I think they have the Texas tattoo on their leg or ankle or some whatever together. But I followed Kyle in college. He played with Chris Sims primarily as his quarterback, but Kyle was number 87, and he was very thin for a college football player.
I've seen the tape. He coach's son, though. That's everybody always says. Yeah, he was try hard. Coach's son, made a few catches, sure hands.
Yep. Yeah. No, he was that guy, but good teammate. Everybody liked him. That sort of guy. So we always root for him. It's very funny because before Steve Sarkisian got the job at Texas, there was some hope that maybe he might come back to his alma mater, kind of like Jim Harbaugh did to Michigan, right, from the 49ers. But I think that they may have made a phone call and not really got anywhere with Kyle Shanahan at that point. So that was several years back now.
Crazy connections. It's a small world. We talk Kasarik, we talk Kyle Shanahan. Now Kasarik is on Shanahan's staff. I think Kasarik ended up playing at like Abilene Christian of all places. So he must have been on the.
Maybe. I thought it was Texas Tech, but maybe I'm wrong. But Washburn was recruiting the crap out of him, out of Caldwell, Texas. Let me see where.
No, yeah, he did. He played at Texas Tech. So maybe. I wonder if maybe that's where he started his. Yeah, he played graduate assistant at Texas Tech. Yeah, you're right. I don't know why I saw Abilene Christian at some point. Maybe I just conflated the school with somebody else. But that's where he got his coaching start. And then Texas A&M Kingsville, Texas A&M Commerce, places I've never heard of. So that's like a division of Texas A&M. There's different Texas A&Ms.
Yeah, kind of like Cal State Long Beach and Cal State, Dominguez, that kind of thing.
Got it. And now he's one of the best in the game as far as D-line coaches go. And
he was always Chris Kasarik was always a baller. Like, there's guys that, even though he had good size, don't get me wrong, but he was always a better producer than he was a prospect. Hopefully that makes sense. Those are the kind of guys that typically make the best coaches too, by the way. The ones that produce more than their talent maybe gives them.
Yeah, because they're not leaning on the awesome measurables. They're having to actually showcase coached traits, right? Like coached skills, which is what they have to impart to other players. So that makes a lot of sense. Chris Kasarik, Jim Washburn, Kyle Shanahan, and then we tie it in with obviously Alfred Collins and Isaiah Nair. I got to read a quick ad and then we'll let you go, Bobby. You know how it works. Everybody, by the way, check out On 3 Texas Football. That's the first ad. And this show is brought to you by Huel. If you're constantly on the move or just tired of skipping meals, Huel has you covered. They're today's sponsor, spelled Huel, and their Black Edition ready to drink is a total game changer. It's a complete meal in one bottle with 35 grams of protein, 27 vitamins and minerals, high fiber, and low sugars, so you feel full, focused, and ready for your day. No prep, no cleanup, just grab and go. Huel's already sold over 500 meals around the world, and now it's your turn to try it. New customers get 15% off, plus a free gift at Huel.com when you use my code Lombardi. Don't miss out. Try it today. That's 15% off, plus a free gift for new customers using my exclusive code Lombardi at Huel.com. Please see our description for the terms and conditions. Skip the stress, not the nutrition. Try Huel today for complete nutrition bottled. Awesome. Did that. It's finished. Everybody go check out Bobby and all of his guys over at On3 Texas Football. 49ers have picked up Alfred Collins. Alfred Collins, that's him. He looks a little bit like Trent Brown because he's Trent Brown's cousin. And we saw him out on the practice field the other day. Bobby, thanks so much for your time. I'm glad that we were able to finally get this done.
Yeah, absolutely. You have a good one, David. Thanks for having me.
Take care, man.
All right.